64. Virtue. Virtue.
He has some weaknesses, but he also has virtues such as honesty and courage.
Virtuous.
The ancient travelers described the Koreans as virtuous and brave people.
Trustworthy.
You can rely on him. He is honest and trustworthy.
Rely on.
We rely on the internet to get information. You should rely on your sense and intuition.
Reliable.
The company is looking for a person who is reliable and hard-working.
Sensible.
It is sensible to deposit some money into your bank accounts for rainy days.
Sensitive.
She is very sensitive to other people's feelings. The poet was very sensitive to criticism.
Decent.
The farmer provided a decent meal for the traveler. The majority of his political opponents are decent citizens.
Opponent.
The Brazilian team is a formidable opponent, but we will do our best. They are the leading opponents of the construction of the new dam.
Formidable.
In the debate that was broadcast live on TV, he proved to be a formidable presidential candidate.
Vicious.
The UN has tried to break the vicious cycle of poverty in developing countries.
Oppose.
The opposition parties opposed the trade agreement.
Adversity.
The king showed respectable courage in the face of adversity.
Foe.
You should learn to distinguish your friends from your foes.
Rival.
This technology will give us a competitive advantage over our rivals. We have built a museum to rival any in the world.
Fearless.
She was a fearless fighter for democracy.
Cowardly.
He was so cowardly that he refused to fight for his country.
Negligence.
The teacher was charged with negligence because the student had been harmed while under his care.
Neglect.
The castle has been neglected for a long time and is in bad shape. His great ideas were neglected by other scientists. After years of neglect, the castle is on the verge of collapse.
Barbarian.
They called the nomads barbarians.
Brutal.
It was a brutal attack on a defenseless woman.
Inhumane.
The drunk man's inhumane attack on the dog created a great outcry among animal lovers.
Humane.
We should create a caring and humane society.
Heartless.
He was a heartless employer. He had no concern for the welfare of his workers.
Cruel.
It is really cruel to make fun of her weight. His death was a cruel blow to the democratic movement.
Savage.
It was a savage attack on a peaceful nation. Sometimes it is hard to distinguish a civilized man from a savage.
Dare.
He wanted to ask her to dance with him, but he didn't dare. He dared to tell her what he had always thought of her works.
Daring.
The general planned a daring attack on the barbarians across the river. We marveled at the daring of the warriors.
Refuse.
They asked Tom to join the fight against invaders, but the coward refused.
Surrender.
The barbarians were surrounded and given 2 days to surrender. The robbers surrendered themselves to the police. They refused to surrender their independence to the empire. They agreed to unconditional surrender.
Yield.
I will cut down trees that yield no fruits. She yielded to the temptation of ice cream and gave up her diet. The king agreed to yield all his power to the parliament. This year's high crop yield will relieve the famine in the country. Words in context. The king faced adversities inside and outside the land. His vicious foes opposed every reform that he designed. They were insensitive to the hardships that the people were going through. Furthermore, there were political rivals or adversaries who wanted to take his throne. So he needed trustworthy advisers he could rely on. He needed virtuous men with virtues such as sensibility and decency. It was a sensitive issue when he considered all his opponents, so he looked for reliable men to reward virtue and punish vice. To make matters worse, barbarians kept on invading his land. Through the cowardly negligence of the former king, the barbarians committed brutal, inhumane crimes heartlessly. Now the king wouldn't neglect his duty or tolerate the cruel acts anymore. But the savages dared to surround a city. The citizens refused to surrender or yield to the savages. The king selected brave, fearless warriors and launched a daring counterattack that captured many savages, but he treated them humanely, not savagely.